This story starts with an HOA Karen calling the cops on my wife because she ignored a knock at the door, and ends with her discovering she picked a fight with the one person in the state she never should have challenged. Before the story begins, tell me which country you're watching from, and if you enjoy true HOA chaos and neighborhood drama, like this video, subscribe for more HOA stories, and hit that hype button, because this one flips the power dynamic fast. Our neighborhood liked to pretend it was a small kingdom, neatly trimmed lawns, matching fences, and neighbors who treated the HOA handbook like scripture. The board used rules as armor, and residents used them as weapons. At the center of the self-appointed enforcement was Karen, a woman who believed titles and authority were interchangeable. She didn't have either, but she behaved as if she ran the entire association. My wife and I moved into the neighborhood with a simple goal: privacy and peace. We had demanding jobs, long hours, and valued quiet evenings. My wife especially carried the weight of responsibility. Her job wasn't ordinary. It demanded composure, leadership, and the ability to manage crises. And because of that, she valued time off more than anyone. Karen had a habit of approaching homes instead of sending written notices when something bothered her. It was her favorite tactic. She believed that knocking on doors added intimidation and urgency. She expected homeowners to answer immediately, regardless of time or circumstances. It fed her ego to be acknowledged face to face. Most neighbors complied to avoid confrontation. My wife did not. One Saturday afternoon, my wife was home alone, taking a rare break from her role. She absorbed the silence, enjoyed the stillness, and allowed herself to recharge. She didn't want interruptions, visitors, or discussions about aesthetic preferences. She especially didn't want to deal with self-appointed enforcers. When Karen knocked on the door, my wife ignored it. The knock continued for several minutes, growing louder and more insistent. Then it stopped. The quiet felt like a victory, but it didn't last. Karen took the lack of response as disrespect. In her mind, ignoring her was equivalent to breaking rules. Instead of walking away, she escalated. She convinced herself something criminal or suspicious was happening. She called the police and reported a homeowner refusing to answer during an HOA inspection. She framed it as a safety concern, suggesting that ignoring her knock indicated wrongful activity. She implied authority she didn't have and requested immediate action. Minutes later, patrol cars entered the neighborhood. My wife saw the arrival through the window, registering surprise but not panic. Her instincts sharpened. The situation shifted from annoyance to something requiring judgment. She knew the process, the procedures officers followed, and the weight of a false report. The police approached the house professionally. They didn't arrive with aggression. They walked the perimeter, assessed the environment, and noted the lack of disturbance. The home looked normal. Nothing suggested danger. The report description didn't align with what they saw. My wife stepped outside calmly. She identified herself to the officers, not just by name, but by role. The officers recognized her immediately. Her position wasn't minor. She was the police chief. She carried authority that wasn't loud or boastful, but unquestionable. The officers shifted from investigation to acknowledgement. They quickly understood the situation. Karen watched from her porch at first, then approached confidently, expecting to reinforce her complaint. She didn't recognize my wife. She saw only a neighbor and assumed superiority. She believed the presence of police validated her actions. That illusion dissolved instantly. The officers explained the nature of the call and the mismatch between the report and reality. They clarified that HOA complaints are not grounds for emergency response. The misuse of law enforcement was noted. The tone changed. This wasn't an inconvenience. This was a false report. Karen's reaction moved from assertive to defensive. She attempted to justify her actions, claiming authority she did not possess. She insisted homeowners were obligated to answer knocks from HOA members. The officers corrected her quickly. They emphasized that residents are under no obligation to respond to unsolicited knocks, and ignoring one is not a crime. Then came the pivot she never anticipated. The officers deferred to my wife, not because she demanded it, but because her title commanded respect. She was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the region. She understood the legal implications better than anyone. Her word wasn't opinion, it was expertise.
Karen's posture faltered. She realized she had tried to use police against the police. It was a power move exposed in the worst way possible. The false report was documented. The officers filed it appropriately, noting the misuse of emergency services and the potential consequences. The HOA board received the details soon after. An emergency meeting followed, not for rule changes, but for damage control. The board reviewed the incident, acknowledging that Karen acted independently, without authority, and outside any guideline. They recognized the liability her actions posed. They couldn't defend her. They couldn't minimize a report made by the police chief. Neighbors began sharing stories. Complaints about knocks, threats masquerading as notices, intimidation passed as enforcement. The pattern became clear. Karen's behavior wasn't random, it was long-standing. Ignoring a knock was never the issue. Control was. The HOA stripped Karen of any unofficial enforcement role. They banned door-knocking for unsanctioned complaints and required written communication for all future issues. They issued a formal warning, citing the police report. They created protocols to prevent individuals from using false authority. The shift in the neighborhood was immediate. Residents relaxed. The fear of random confrontations faded. The belief that HOA power was absolute shattered. The board restructured communication, reducing personal enforcement and increasing clarity. People no longer felt obligated to answer unsolicited knocks. Karen disappeared from the public space. Her reputation changed. Instead of being seen as an enforcer, she became an example of overreach. She hadn't just crossed a line, she had challenged someone far beyond her imagined authority. My wife returned to her routine quietly. She didn't boast or retaliate. She didn't need to. The truth spoke louder. Her title didn't create power, her composure did. She handled the situation without confrontation, knowing consequences would follow naturally. The neighborhood learned something important. Ignoring a knock is not disrespect. Misusing authority is. Calling the police is not a tool for HOA dominance. Power isn't given to those who demand it. It belongs to those who understand its responsibility. Karen learned that titles matter, but only when they're real. The police chief she tried to intimidate didn't need to raise her voice or threaten punishment. She simply stood her ground and let authority speak through facts, not ego. If you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe for more HOA and Karen drama, hit that hype button, and tell me which country you're watching from. More stories are coming, and you won't want to miss them.